All right, in our ongoing series, meeting mayoral candidates in Ottawa, I'm pleased to welcome Catherine McKenney. They've been a longtime city councillor and now running for mayor. And the first question I have for you is, what made you decide to take that leap from running for city councillor now to run for mayor?
Well, Eric, like everyone in this city, I saw what potential there was. This is such a wonderful modern city with so much potential. We can really work to make it the healthiest city in the country, really, and by making it a green city and a well-connected city. But there's also gaps, and we have to also ensure that that we're taking care of more marginalized communities and people. So I decided that it was something I was very passionate about, and decided to put my name in the hat, if you will.
Well, terrific. And the marginalized groups are what we want to talk about here today, because at Operation Come Home, we're very selfish and want to talk about our own issues. And so that's what we're going to do here. And I just want to start with housing, right? Housing's probably the biggest issue that we have right now in terms of affordable housing disappearing at an alarming rate and not being built at the commensurate rate. We're in the middle of a crisis. I was at the rally that you held in 2020, just before the pandemic hit, to declare homelessness an emergency in Ottawa. And what progress have we made since then, and what progress can we make in the coming years to address this?
Well, the declaration of a housing emergency was important. It was important to the community because it provided us with a lens through everything we do. We had to ensure that we were keeping in mind that we've declared this emergency. I've been disappointed and but seen some successes. Certainly, I've always felt we could do more, that we could have had a more concrete path towards ending chronic homelessness. But there have been some successes. Certainly, during the pandemic, the federal government did invest in, some rapid housing initiatives. Sorry, my dog's jumping.
I'm sure mine will join us too.
Gosh, that's being home. Sorry. So rapid housing initiatives that the federal government invested in during the pandemic will mean that, the city will, be able to really make a difference in chronic homelessness for women, certainly, and Indigenous women. But, we still have so many youth that are unhoused, as you know. Our shelters are full. They've got, over 2,000 people still sleeping in shelters, and hundreds of families living in motels. So a lot of work to do, and a big part of why I decided to run for mayor, because I know that with a good plan and good investments from other levels of government, I know that we can end chronic homelessness, certainly, reduce the number of people living in shelters, help youth and to transition from youth programming, youth housing, to adult housing, where they're able to live independently. And really stop people from falling into homelessness, because we do house people, but so many more people fall into homelessness. So it is something that I'm very, very serious about, and it would be a key priority for me.
And I think you hit on something there, right? Because there are two prongs to this. There are the people who have been chronically homeless, right? At Operation Come Home, we deal with youth. So our goal is to prevent them from becoming long-term homeless people. But there's also the people who are falling into homelessness because of the affordability crisis and because of the rising cost of living and all the rest of this. And that seems to be a wave that has not yet peaked. And that's going to be a little more serious. So are those two separate solutions, or are those the same solution? Can we
Mm-hmm.
cover both of those things at once?
Oh, absolutely. We have to, because we can, we continue to house people, and we do every day. So, people get housed in this city. But I liken it to, trying to catch water from a waterfall, and, while you're catching it all here, it's falling over here. You have to have, your solution has to address both. So we have to certainly, house people, find housing solutions for people who are chronically homeless. That most often takes supportive housing, wraparound supports, whether it's in aggregate housing or whether it's in scattered housing where people live independently in the community. You house, you wrap around supports, whether that's for, addiction, safe supply, mental health supports, but you stabilize someone and then have them housed. On the other hand, what we call core housing need, and core housing need really is when a household is at risk of losing their housing because they can't afford it. So most people who are in core housing need in the city have got well-maintained housing. It's adequate for their needs. It's the right size, but they just cannot afford where they are. So that, a few years ago, that number was 36,000 households in the city. So for 36,000 households, we don't necessarily have to build all new housing, but we have to help them to pay for the housing that they're in. We have to, with rent supplements, housing allowances, and that's where I'm a bit more critical of the federal government, because it is one of the goals of their national housing strategy is to reduce core housing need by 50%. And for us to be able to do that, we need those funds, and they haven't been as substantive as we need them to be, because again, those are the households for the most part who are falling into homelessness. And once you fall into homelessness, as you know, whether you're a youth, whether you're an adult, whether you're a family with young children, first off, you're traumatized. It is a traumatizing, thing to go through in your life. I don't think most people could really comprehend it. You're there often for a long time, right?
Right.
Once you fall in, getting out is very difficult, because we don't have affordable rentals. We don't have enough affordable rentals in the city. So preventing that, it just saves so much money. It's an incredible saving. We keep people healthier, and then we can work on, eliminating chronic homelessness, and then eventually just eliminating shelter use. I think there will always be, I shouldn't say there'll always be, for a long time, there will likely be the need for some shelter, but it really needs to go back to being emergency shelter for the most part.
Yeah, and you mentioned the scattered housing model, which is something that we're a proponent of at Operation
Yeah.
Home. Seems to be the best way to, not only provide the supports, but to integrate people into the community, right? And you're not just
Yes.
a huge building and warehousing everybody there so that people don't see homeless anymore. Now they all live in one building, but you've just sort of moved the problem somewhere else, right? And that requires, I think, and we seem to run across this quite often, working with developers, right? When a developer creates a new building, a new complex, there has to be some sort of incentive to create an affordable housing unit in that building and in existing buildings, right? Where, like you said, the people who are on the verge of losing their housing, it's much cheaper for us to prop them up and allow them to stay in the home that they're in than it is to allow them to become homeless, right?
Of course, yes.
And so I'm wondering how you envision working with developers, or if you do, in that circumstance, to try to create this scattered housing model.
Well, we do have, an inclusionary zoning policy. It's just being developed. That's something that the province has control over in the Planning Act. So the province only allows us to do inclusionary zoning where we require of a developer who's building new developments, usually large development, to provide, say, 10% of that development as affordable. We're only allowed as a city to do that at major transit areas. We're not allowed to do it across the city. It is, as I say, a provincial rule. I often caution that inclusionary zoning is not a magic bullet, silver bullet by any stretch. The housing that's created through inclusionary zoning is what I would call more moderate affordable, not deeply affordable. However, having said that, when we talk about, making sure that people can be scattered in the community, and by scattered, I mean giving them choice where they want to live. Some people want to live in housing that is, has the supports on site, but others, want to live out in the community. And so that one of the key tenets of Housing First is giving self-determination, that people choose where and how they want to live. So, to adequately house people in the community, we need landlords to work with us. We need, existing, landlords of existing buildings where we can house people, we can subsidize their rent for them. And quite frankly, people do thrive. We have hundreds of examples across the city where people are living that way. So people do thrive. But that's all the more reason why we have to do everything we can to maintain our existing affordable market rental housing, right? Like, we can't keep taking that down. And if we do, we have to find a way of replacing that, not dem evicting or rent evicting people out of that type of housing, because that's where somebody would go, right? Like that's the type of housing that you would look for.
For sure. And, making sure that doesn't happen is a short-term solution. And, the scattered housing and the rest of that, more of a long-term solution. But in the immediate few months, right? We're coming up on winter.
Mm-hmm.
We've got people who are building tent encampments right now because they have nowhere else to go. And then we're tearing down those encampments and we're moving them elsewhere where there's, they can't go to a shelter. The shelters are full. What's something that we can do sort of in the immediate short term before the winter hits to help those people, right? At the beginning of COVID, right, we had Tom Brown Arena. There was, a ton of space there. It was an emergency situation where we, allowed people to house in that arena and others across Ottawa. What's something that we can do in the immediate short term, October, right after the election?
Yeah. We have to have shelter. Shelter can mean many things, right? It can mean, an arena that's been converted. It can mean an existing shelter. It can mean your home, like wherever you are. You have a right to safe shelter. Going into the winter, we do know that people do choose encampments. We've not seen the large encampments that some other cities have seen, and I have some theories behind that, whether I'm correct or not, but we haven't. But we know that they're there. Like I know exactly where they are, and I know exactly where people not exactly, but where people tend to sleep outside, especially in the spring, summer, fall. But Ottawa is an exceptionally harsh has exceptionally harsh weather in winter. And while some people still continue to choose to sleep outdoors, we've got to have the shelter space for anyone who needs it. So if it's, COVID certainly was a challenge. It meant that, we had, tried to, give more space, almost impossible to do. And so, arenas opened up. If we come into that this winter again, where we just don't have the space in the shelters, we've got to open up city facilities and public facilities for people. People, if they choose not to sleep outside, we've got to provide them with some form of shelter. And again, that's in the very short term, very immediate term. I'm a proponent of housing and driving hard to make sure that we build the housing and provide the housing for people who need it, so that we can move away from shelter.
Absolutely. Now, we're talking about city supports in this way, and there are a few things that have been exacerbated by the COVID pandemic. Among them, opioid crisis is more out of control now than it maybe has ever been. We're seeing fentanyl in a ton of ways on the street that we haven't seen before. And that's really reaching a fever pitch as well. There are wait lists at addiction treatment centers. We only have a few safe sites around Ottawa, and we also are at a loss for mental health professionals. There just aren't enough to cover the need, even if we were able to hire them. What are some of the things that we can do in the immediate future, and then long term here in Ottawa?
Well, immediately, Eric, we have to start investing in people. So, we have got a poison drug crisis. Imagine if we had a poison food crisis in this city. Right. People were dying of poison food. We'd react strongly. But we have got people who are dying of, poison. People who use drugs and have addictions, and those drugs are poison. So we've got to first off, we've got to invest in the people who are most at risk. We have to. Safe supply is shown to be successful, right? Safe supply combined with, obviously safer consumption sites. We need more of those in the city, spread across the city, but also, once we stabilize somebody, once somebody's on safe supply, the most critical thing for them is housing. They need to get housing. And I've seen people who I've known for years who, live in the neighborhood I live in, who, have been street involved, and, and I've seen the change once they've been on a safe supply of drugs. They're not, they're not out there all day long sourcing poison drugs at risk of overdose, ending up in hospital, right? Like, just the money we spend on healthcare and policing people who have addictions, who are unwell. That all has to, we have to rethink that. What does community safety and well-being really mean? And it means taking care of the people who need it the most. So we need to support them, and we need to get them housing. And I've seen it, and once you get housing, you get employment or education, right? I know Operation Come Home, that's a key thing for you guys. Employment and education, it changes people's lives. Well, until somebody is healthy again and has housing, then we can start looking at, how do we get you further education if that's what you want? How do we get you employed? And it changes people's lives. It's not rocket science, but it takes political will. It takes funding up front, and it means that we are serious about helping people who use drugs.
Yeah, it really all does come down to housing first, right?
It really does.
Yeah, and
yeah,
it also involves, I think, changing the public narrative a little bit, where we look at drug use as a public health issue rather than a policing and criminal issue, right?
Absolutely. And it's, decriminalization is important too. Once you have safe supply, we have to stop criminalizing homelessness, poverty, mental illness, addictions. We don't criminalize somebody who has, a heart condition, right? You wouldn't call the police. If one of your neighbors was having a heart attack, you wouldn't think to call the police, right? But today, that's all we have, right? Like if somebody's having psychotic breakdown, or they're in trouble, there's almost no one else to call right now. It's policing. It's the only option that we have, and quite frankly, it's unfair to police, right? Like they're not. Yeah. Now my cat's coming into the frame. I have a zoo here.
and I think that's a key point too, right? Is that it is unfair to police to ask them to do all of these things, which, really in a lot of ways shouldn't be their bailiwick in the first place, right?
Absolutely.
And what we find at Operation Come Home, right? Get somebody into housing, and you manage to find them somewhere that they could work, and they have to get some of the paperwork done. Well, all of a sudden they run up against this thing where they have, $12,000 in unpaid fines that they've received because they were panhandling, because they were trespassing, because minor offenses. But we have decided that the police is there, so let's just use them, and there has to be a better way.
Absolutely. I'll give you an example. In the ward I represent, Dundonald Park is what I consider a living room, really, for many people who are precariously housed. We don't have the bigger shelters in Somerset ward, but we have a lot of rooming houses, and a lot of people bunk up in rooming houses. So there'll be 4 or 5 people sharing a room. And Dundonald Park is has always been quite an interesting park, complex, complex,
vibrant. I would say
vibrant, yeah. And it I'm not dismissing in the past that there weren't some issues, but it functioned well. And then COVID happened, and the rest of us all went home, closed our doors, and people who were left behind were people who often are unwell, but they needed that outdoor space and started to gather. And we saw, I mean, it's not as dire as it was 2 years ago, but in Dundonald Park, we'll have people who come in, and they start to they'll start drinking, and by 10, 11 o'clock at night they've had too much, and fights will break out, and often I'm asked for more policing in Dundonald Park. But I can tell you, and I have this conversation with my community police officer all the time. They're in there all day long. They can't stop it. And it's that it's just not the solution, right? The solution is, if we had people in the park who could, work, housing workers, outreach workers, people who could, ensure that people who are more vulnerable are safer, and that's what we need in that park. And we just don't have, we're just not where we're putting the resources, right? Instead, we're saying, just sending in kind of band-aid solutions. So, and that's happening elsewhere. And I don't mean to make it sound simple. It's not simple. They are very complex issues with very complex and difficult solutions, but there are solutions, and we do have to support people much better than we ever have.
No doubt. All right, I'm going to close this out with what I think is a less complex issue, a simpler issue, and that is you're running for mayor, you've been city councilor, there are city councilors on the ballot as well. There's a lot of elections happening at the same time. One of them is for school board trustee. People can vote for their school board trustee while they're also voting for mayor and also voting for their city councilor. And there are some people running for school board trustee right now who are running on a very explicitly anti-2S LGBTQ platform, specifically anti-trans.
Trans, yeah.
And we at Operation Come Home obviously see much higher rates of LGBTQ youth, trans youth in particular, than in the general population, because home life can be very, very difficult for them. This kind of rhetoric that we're seeing in this campaign makes that worse, and is certainly harmful to the youth that we serve. A recent stat, we just did a survey, 40% of the youth in our employment programs identify as lesbian, gay, transgender, which is a crazy number that we didn't expect. But really it is a huge, huge number. And I'm just, I know that as mayor, you can't exactly go in and make changes in a school board, but I just wanted your thoughts on that. That we're kind of seeing this creep from the American side coming to our politics.
Yeah, it is very difficult to watch. It is very targeted. This anti-trans movement. It is mostly an anti-trans movement. That's what they've glommed onto because they're using children, right? And and so to see people running for school board who have those very explicit anti-trans views is difficult. I think two things. I think one is Ottawa is an very open, accepting city. We saw that at Pride last Sunday, right? Like it was the biggest Pride parade ever. And that is the vast majority of residents in this city. There's a small percentage who, hold these, anti-queer, anti-trans views, certainly. But it's also a reminder that we need to pay attention to elections. We need to pay attention to who's representing us. We need to, and at the school board, like just think about the changes that a school board can make to the services in your child's school, or just how the things are being approached in a child's school. So while I find it difficult to contemplate and to I don't look very much at any of their messaging, but it really is. I think that I think again we've I trust that the people will make good decisions, and but I think what you pointed out, Eric, that 40% of the kids that you serve at Operation Come Home are there are LGBTQI. It is. We still have a long way to go in ensuring that we are tackling those difficult issues, whether it's racism in schools, whether it's anti-gay, anti-queer sentiment in our society. We always have to remember that there are always some people who are still at risk of that type of behavior.
No doubt. And yeah, I don't want to mention the names of the people running on this platform because it is really all about name recognition, but this sort of anti-trans platform does get their name out there, and I'm worried that when people go to vote, it'll be the one name they recognize. They're not really sure why, because I will admit I rarely paid attention to the school board trustee elections in the past and decided on a candidate that way, but I do encourage people to look at your particular riding and the school board trustees who are running there, and keep education safe for our children. And
absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. I hope that your name recognition gets you up to the top of the race, and best of luck with the rest of the campaign. Thanks for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thanks, Eric. It's been great. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you. And thanks for all of the work that you do. Operation Come Home. I'm a huge fan.